What's up, YouTube? It's your boy Jerome, and I'm here with the review for Greenleaf. This is season 3, episode 10, and it's titled The Promised Land. So, without further ado, let's get started with the video. Alright, so this episode starts with Lady May. So we see her, she's at Calvary, and she's in her office, and she's writing an email, and at the email, we see her sign it, love mama. So then what it is the email is she sent it out to, all the kids in the family, including that dumbass Zora. So, everybody's reading email, Charity, Zora, Jacob and Carissa, Charity, Sophia, and Grace are reading it. And basically in this email, she's just telling them that, it is officially official that she and Bishop are now divorced from each other. And, they're not going to be together. But, she's giving some, she's talking positively. And then in this email, she did include, Bishop. She did include Bishop in it. And Bishop is reading this email out loud in front of Percy Lee. So, like I said, this is the end of the era of 40-year marriage between Bishop and Lady May. All right, so then we got Carissa. She is on the phone with the church members. And, they're talking about Cheap Dirty Blonde Skank quitting. So she asks Jacob, do you know why she quit? And Jacob says, no, she didn't tell me anything about why she quit. And then Carissa's kind of wondering, well, I wonder if Basie's back. And Jacob was like, I don't think that Basie's back, because if Basie was back, we would know that. And Carissa's like, well, how will we know that Basie's back? And he tells her something. I didn't really catch what he was saying to her. So now Carissa, what she's going to have to do is take off from her job at the school and go to the church and work there. And she's also going to go to the office that she should have gotten as First Lady once Basie left. But, Tasha, Cheap Dirty Blonde Skank stayed there in that office. So then she goes over to Triumph. And while she's there, they have a new accountant. And she's talking to the new accountant. And, he's looking at all the financials of Triumph. And he's looking at one of the accounts that doesn't kind of add up. He's saying that it looks off, and he's telling her that it's some money coming out of it, but he doesn't know where the money is 100% going. And he says something about Jacob. I'm like, this has nothing to do with Jacob. You guys are so barking up the wrong tree. Look at Cheap Dirty Blonde Skank. All right, so Carissa, she is showing Jacob what the accountant found. And, she's asking Jacob if he knew anything about it. And Jacob says, I knew nothing about it. And then she's like, well, what about, Cheap Dirty Blonde Skank? And he was like, well, she never mentioned anything to me about it. I mean, she did say something about, I guess that church that Jacob tried to do a long time ago, but whatever. And she's like, well, we need to talk to her. So he said, you know what, I'll call her later. And Carissa's like, no, we need to call her now. So then we see Jacob, he's trying to call Cheap Dirty Blonde Skank. And then over at her place, we see that Cheap Dirty Blonde Skank is drunk as crap. And she's ignoring the phone calls. So then we hear a knock at the door. And she goes to the door and she tells Rochelle to go away, that I don't have time for you right now. So then she opens the door and it is Rachel Rochelle there. And like I said, she's there drowning her sorrow. So she's really drunk. So, when Rachel Rochelle comes into the house, she tells her that she quit working at Triumph. And Rachel Rochelle's like, why the hell would you quit working there? She's like, you need to go back there and you need to get your job. And Cheap Dirty Blonde Skank is like, you know what? They probably have already hired a new accountant. And she says, yeah, and they probably have figured out figured out your sloppy ways and what you've done. And, Cheap Dirty Blonde Skank is like, what is done is done. I've transferred the money from Triumph. Excuse me. She's transferred the money from Triumph, and Bishop has withdrew the money, so she's done. And then, she's saying that, Rachel Rochelle has messed with an innocent man. And she's like, who, Jacob? And she says, yes. And then she asks her, is she in love with Jacob? And she said, well, why wouldn't I be? And then, she's talking about Basie, how, basically she just disrespected Basie. She's like, Jacob is a good guy, whereas Basie has his issues with money, basically. And, like I said, she's disrespecting him. And she's telling Rochelle that he is dead. And Rochelle says, well, what if he's not? And, she was like, well, if he's not dead, where is he? And then she tells Rich Rochelle to get out before she calls the police on her. And if she calls the police on her, she's not going to quite remember which story is the real story to tell. So then we see Rich Rochelle go out to the car and she makes a phone call talking about, we have a problem. All right, and then we have this other scene where Carissa, she calls Cheap Dirty Blonde Skank once again. And this time, Cheap Dirty Blonde Skank, she answers the phone. But again, she's still drunk like she was early in the episode. So this time she is apologetic to Carissa, and you know, she tells her it only happened one time, it didn't mean anything. And Carissa's like, what is she talking about? And then that's when she basically, you know, Carissa was trying to tell her about the accountant, but when she was trying to tell her about the accountant, that's when Cheap Dirty Blonde Skank told her it was just one kiss, and she hung up the phone. And Carissa's like, a kiss? Girl, I ain't know nothing about that. So then we got, you know, mad Carissa. She is going over to Jacob's office at Triumph, and she's, you know, confronting him about the kiss. And Jacob is not denying it at this point. I mean, shit, he really can't deny it because, I mean, Cheap Dirty Blonde Skank, who was drunk, told him, and she was like, you know, your girl who I called her, and you know, she's like really drunk, and she told me that you guys had a kiss. And then, you know, he says that when the kiss happened, he tried to tell her that he wasn't like that anymore. And this is when Carissa went in on Jacob. She was like, you know, that's the reason why Zora's gone, and maybe me and the little boy should leave. I'm like, well, damn, Carissa, tell him how you really feel. So then the accountant comes in, and he's telling Jacob and Carissa that there is $200,000 that is gone, but he's just not sure where that $200,000 has went to. Shit, I can tell you where it went to. It went to Bishop's account, and Bishop has that money. That wretched ass Rochelle. All right, and then we have Jacob. He is calling Cheap Dirty Blonde Skank once again, but again, she's not answering the phone because I think I'm like, girl, how long have you been drinking? Like, you might have alcohol poisoning at this time. And you know, Carissa wants him to continue to call her because she's not answering the phone. She's like, you're gonna keep calling that tramp. You're gonna keep calling that little hussy. I want her to pick up the phone and let her know we know what she's done. And I'm like, how they figured out that she took the money from Triumph and put it in the Bishop's account with the help of Richard Rochelle. But we'll see if that's what that is. So back over at Cheap Dirty Blonde Skanks, Richard Rochelle is once again, she's back. She's knocking at the door. And Cheap Dirty Blonde Skank is like, you know what, Rochelle? I told you once before to go away. So she grabs a lamp and she goes to the door, and then she opens the door, and there is Richard Rochelle standing. But this time, Richard Rochelle is not by herself. She is joined by none other than her half-brother, Basie. I'm like, oh, Basie's still alive. I'm like, look at here. Look what the cat drug in. All right, so now I'm going to move over to young, light-skinned Ike Turner and Zora. So, little young, light-skinned Ike Turner, he's on a radio interview, and, you know, he's talking about his music, which I'm like, shit, I completely forgot that he does music. So then you got Zora's dumbass. She's over there in the corner on the couch listening to Isaiah when he's doing his interview. So, you know, when they finish the interview, they open it up for, you know, some of his fans to call in to ask him some questions. So one little girl asked him, you know, when are you going on tour? And when you go on tour, can, you know, I get some floor's tickets for me and my girls? And, you know, he says, well, you know, I don't know when I'm going on tour, but you can get in my DMs about that. And I'm just like, you can get in his DMs, and your supposed girlfriend is right there in front of you, but you don't tell another girl to get in your DM. Right. So they hang up that call, and then another girl calls in, and she's asking about the stuff that happened up there at the Greenleaf house when he was going live, when he picked up Zora and he got into it with Jacob and the rest of the family. So, you know, he's like, I don't really want to talk about that. And she's like, but is that your girl? And little young light-skinned Ike Turner says, everything is everything. And I'm like, what does that mean? So then you have Zora, she's sitting over there and she's just looking. I'm like, hello, little girl. If that's your boyfriend and he got two girls calling back to back. The first one asked him for tickets and he said, get into my DMs. The second one, she asked if you're his girlfriend and he didn't even claim you. Like, that should have been a prime example for you to be like, you know what? I'm going to get up and I'm going to dip out, because if you can't claim me, what are we doing? So then Zora's phone goes off and she got a message from Spellman. I don't know what the message said, But the way Isaiah looked at her, he's like, it looked like, girl, turn that shit off or I'm gonna pop your ass. So then once the interview is over, you get little young light skinned Ike Turner. He goes up to Zora and he just basically knocks Zora's phone on her hand. I'm like, Zora, how many times do you have to sit here and let this boy do stuff to you before you realize he is no good for you? Like, I really don't understand what it is with Zora. Like, do she need a slap to the face, kick to the gut, punch to the face, what, to realize he is a no good little dude? Like, I can't stand him. So then we also had this scene where we got dumbass Zora and young light skinned Ike Turner together. And I guess she was cooking him something, fixing him something to eat. I'm not sure. But I know he was supposedly working on his music. So she was saying, she's apologizing about what happened at the interview and, how she got an email from Spelman and she had forgot that she had even applied to Spelman and they want to set up an interview with her. And he's like, you're not doing that. I'm like, who the fuck are you to tell her what she's going to do? Like, are you her daddy? Are you her husband? Like, who are you to tell this girl what she's not going to do? So, he's telling her she can't do it because he wants her to go on tour with him. I'm like, so you can mess with other little girls in front of her face? Zora, you got to be smarter than that. So, then she get upset. She's talking about the hoes that called and, asked them what kind of water they want so she can send them something to, quench their thirst. And I'm like, Zora, she might be thirsty, but your boyfriend entertained her thirstiness, so you might want to give them both some water to rehydrate themselves. So then he tells Zora basically that, because she's talking about him not claiming her, and he's like, well, once you prove yourself worthy of being claimed, then I'll claim you. Well, I'm like, is she a dog, a cat, a fish, an animal? When she's worthy of being claimed, nigga, what? Zora is really, really stupid to me. And then he's telling her how, Spelman's not going to want a high school dropout. She can get her GED and go to school, you little dumb fool. I swear to God, I cannot stand Isaiah. That little nigga gets on my last nerve. And then lastly, we have Zora. She is at home with little dumb, light-skinned Ike Turner Isaiah, and she's looking at that email that she got from Spelman. I'm like, little girl, do something smart. Go back to school. Get away from him. I don't care what you do. Just do something smart that does not involve that little fool. All right, so next we have Charity. She's in her office, and there's a guy that comes into her office, and she thinks he's someone else, but then he tells her, no, I'm Michael. I am Maxine's music director. So, she starts to talk to him, and then he says, you know what, before we even really get into business, can we pray? And Charity's like, sure. And I'm looking at Charity's face. I'm like, Charity, keep your panties on because this might not last as long as you think it is. Because there's going to be something, he's going to do something that you're not going to like. Mark my words. So then after this meeting with Michael, he asked Charity to dinner. And, she said she has to go home to her son. And he was like, oh, well, Maxine didn't tell me that you were married. She says, she's like, I'm not married. Well, I'm not married anymore. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. She says, I am divorced. And she says, I'm going to let you know now before you find out from anyone else. My ex-husband is gay. And, he's talking about how, Kevin is deceptive. And I'm like, I'm like, you got a lot of nerve to be talking about something that you don't know a whole lot about. But interesting. So then we also move back over. Charity is at home with her son. What is that little boy's name? I actually forget that little boy's name. I actually do forget that child's name. But she gets a call from Michael, and he wants her to, he wants to plan something with her because he's gonna be in the area for a week. And Charity's like, okay, that's fine, we can do that. And then she says, you know what? I have to talk about the conversation that we had earlier because she said when you mentioned my ex-husband, who is also the father of my son, when you said he was deceptive, she's like, that kind of bothered me and threw me off. And then, he's telling her, well, he is deceptive. He is deceptive. He deceived you and all this stuff. And, Charity's like, you know what? I'm gonna stop you right there. She said, I feel like I deserve better, and it's just not you. And I'm like, way to go, Charity. I'm glad you didn't take your panties off for him, because I felt like for a minute there, you was about to get sucked in, give him some, and find out he was a flawed person. Well, flawed for you. All right, so we got Lady May and Maxine. They walking around Calvary, and then they bump into Bishop. And, Lady May and Maxine are still preparing for day with Lady May. So Bishop, like I said, they're talking about it, and Bishop wants to know, how do you prepare for this? And then May's event, since this is going to be her last one. And, Maxine gives him some advice about what he could do, places he can go, things he can do. And then, he asks her, well, who's a donkey? And she's like, neither one of us. She's like, but you're the ass. So then May says that she feels bad for Bishop because he looks lost in his own church. And Maxine says it won't be his for long. So then Maxine and May are back in her office, and they're going over the program and who's speaking. So basically, Lady May has Jacinda Butler speaking, and Maxine is like, but why don't you have Grace doing it? And then Corinne comes in and says that Lionel is calling, and May says, have him call back later. And, once Corinne leaves, Maxine's asking her, is, Lionel the one? She says, I'm not talking about it. And May says that she promised Jacinda that she could talk, but Maxine feels like Grace is going to be the better option for having the speaking to the crowd, because she feels like Grace will bring in some younger people. So Lady May says no, not doing it. All right, so then we had this scene where Maxine and Lady May, they are singing in her office, and Maxine is trying to get Lady May to sing at date with Lady May, and Lady May is like, I'll think about it. And then she once again brings up Grace, and she just wants to know what's going on between May and Grace. But May ducks and dodges that conversation, basically like a deadbeat daddy on avoiding child support. So, it's weird how Lady May, because Maxine is adamant that she wants Grace to speak, but Lady May is not at all hearing it. So then we see the scene where Lady May goes to see Lionel, and she wants to know what Lionel wants. And Lionel says he wants to talk about his daughter, and I'm like, there we go. His daughter. Is that the reason that Lady May has this big issue with Grace? Because Grace might not be Bishop's daughter. If that's what it is, I'm like, damn, I did not see that coming. So then we see Bishop. He was earlier in the episode, we saw Rachel Rochelle, and she was in the office, and she's talking about that's where Grace is going to set up for her legal defense. And then she asked him if the rumors are true about him and Lady May. He's like, well, actually, he said, what rumors? And she says the rumors that you and Lady May are no longer married. So he says, you know what? The rumors are true. May and I are divorced. And then she suggests that they go out for, lunch or drinks. And I'm screaming to the TV, hell no. Don't go with her, Bishop. But we do see Bishop. He and Rochelle are together, and they are drinking. And, he's talking about how he needs to find a place. And Rachel Rochelle's like, she can help him. I'm like, Bishop, do not listen to that gutter snipe. Like, heed my warning. No, don't go anywhere she says go. That is the devil telling you wrong. All right, and lastly, we're going to talk about Grace. So Grace and Rachel Rochelle, they were walking around Calvary. They were discussing Cora Lee. And when they're discussing Cora Lee, they walk right by her, and she's sitting there waiting for them. So they go into her office, into Grace's office, and they're talking to Cora Lee. And Cora Lee is talking about, the DA's offer. And Grace is like, but I thought when we, turned it down the first time that was it. And she says no, that he came back to her. And Rachel Rochelle's like, he came back to her because he doesn't have a case. So Grace is like, Cora Lee, why don't you just sit down with the lawyer and hear what he has to say? And, she's like, is it because the DA is coming after me? And, Cora Lee is like, I'm facing life, or I could take 20 years and still see my kids. And then Rochelle tells Cora Lee her story and how her mother went to jail when she was a kid, and it put her and her sister in a system. And then Grace is like, oh, here we go. Some information that I can use. Well, not use against you. Here's some information that I can dig and see what I can find out about you. So, Rich Rochelle is telling Cora Lee not to take the deal because she's not going to do to her kids what happened to her and her sister. So Cora Lee says, you know what? Can I just sit down with the lawyer and see what he has to say? So they say, okay. So then Grace calls Darius and she's telling Darius that she has found some information, finally has something on Richard Rochelle. So then we had this scene where Coralie is meeting with the lawyer, and the lawyer is basically telling Coralie that he can get her off. So Coralie takes him up, and she tells Richard Rochelle and Grace that she's afraid. And they both tell her, you know what, it's okay to be afraid, but we got this. And then we have Maxine. Maxine goes to Grace's office, and she's asking Grace about her legal defense fund and how she can help. So Grace is like, you can tweet, Facebook, anything. You can email some stuff. And, she's like, well, you know what? I can cut a check for you. And Grace is like, oh, that's really nice. But she has an ulterior motive as well while she's in Grace's office, because she wants to know what is going on between Grace and Lady May. And Grace is like, I don't know what you're talking about. There's nothing going on between me and my mom. So then we see Darius. He's calling Grace back. And he tells her that a friend of his in the police department, I believe, said that they found some information on Rochelle. He was like, you know what, come take a ride with me. We can see where this lead takes us. So they do go for a ride, and they come to this house, and there's this lady there, and she's like, can I help you guys? Are you guys Jehovah's Witnesses? And Grace was like, no. She's like, there was a Rochelle Cross here who lived here. And she's like, Cross, don't know her. And, she said, well, her sister lived here, and a woman knows who she's talking about at that time. And she says, but her last name is not Cross, it's James. And when she said James, not Rochelle, but Grace's face completely went down. So then lastly, we see Grace. She goes to see Bishop. And, Bishop is all happy. But when he looks at Grace, he's like, something is off with you. She said, I'm concerned. He tells her she should be, scratch that. She goes to see Bishop. Bishop's happy, but her face is not. And she tells him he should be concerned about who Rochelle is. And he's like, if you got something bad to say about her, do not say it. But she then tells him that Richard Rochelle is Daryl James's daughter and Basie Skank's half sister. And the look on Bishop's face, it looks like he saw a freaking ghost. But that was the episode. So like the video, leave your comments, and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys later.